The literature says that androgen receptors upregulate when you agonize them with something like testosterone. Puberty took years. TRT, the effects of TRT takes years. When we look at the clinical outcomes that we're trying to achieve with TRT, we're looking at the effects from prolonged exposure to androgens over time. This is what we're looking to improve. Things like the thing that I try to teach them over this period is you have to now meet the medicine halfway. You have to show up in a way that you would be optimizing your natural levels if you were making them naturally. And that's why the natural testosterone optimization stuff is the same as the treatments for getting rid of side effects on TRT. It's dropping body fat, dropping vices, eating well, moving more, having good cardiovascular fitness. You can't have optimal testosterone levels and get out of breath climbing upstairs, because you would never be having those optimal testosterone levels if you had poor cardiovascular fitness. And that discrepancy between what you would be making and what you're taking will show up as side effects.
That's a very good point. So in that scenario there, we've got that, say, 3 to 6 month period where these acute effects are setting in. What should people be expecting to see in terms of positives there versus the longer, more genetic based effects that are going to take place 6, 12, 18, 24 months and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at the clinical outcomes that we're trying to achieve with TRT, we're looking at the effects from prolonged exposure to androgens over time. This is what we're looking to improve. Things like basically restoring you and turning you into the man that you should have been all along. And that's a process that takes time. Puberty took years. TRT, the effects of TRT takes years. However, the acute subjective benefits that you can receive at the start are a welcome change when you've had low testosterone for a while. And I'm sure you can attest to that as I can as well. The benefits that we're looking, so I like to kind of put things out in, if we're looking at a graph, to go, okay, let's say that we break the benefits down into like, feeling better mentally, feeling better, I don't want to use the word spiritually, but feeling more like masculine, feeling that kind of androgenic, well-being sense, improved immune system, improved, muscle hypertrophy, reduced body fat, as long as you're training and eating properly, of course. And then libido and sexual function. That's the big one that a lot of guys talk about. The problem is, well, not the problem, the reality and the limitation of TRT is that libido is impacted by everything else in your psychology, physiology. It's the downstream effect of everything. Libido is a signal for you to reproduce. So if you're in a survival state, your body's not going to signal you to reproduce. So what I like to say to guys, and this turns out to be very true, is that over the 6 months, all of these graphs will start to move up at different points. Typically, people start to feel energized first. They feel more activated. Maybe they feel a bit more confident. Maybe they go, oh, now that diet and training program, I'm actually getting the results I should have been getting the whole time, which I wasn't. The last one that moves is libido. So sometimes you can get like a surge of libido for the first couple of weeks because you get this dopaminergic response from your body being like, holy crap, there's a whole bunch of testosterone here that I've never had before. But the sexual benefits of testosterone, they start to move for some guys after 3 to 6 months, and then can really take multiple years to truly take effect. And one of the big mistakes guys make is they get, let's say 6 months in, and they go, I had a massive libido surge at the start, and now I'm kind of closer to where I was before. And I'll turn around and go, do you feel 20% better than you felt before you started? Oh yeah, I feel at least 20%. Cool, that's a win. That's not a bad thing. Some guys think that once you reach the optimal serum testosterone level, that you will feel the optimal benefits of TRT. This is not stupid. This makes sense, because with any other drug or medication you take, when it reaches peak serum levels, that's when you feel it the most. Your pre-workout, you feel the most when it peaks in your system. Testosterone, what you're hoping to achieve and feel is the prolonged exposure to that level for months and years. So that can be the thing that guys can sometimes be a little bit disappointed with, but also just need a reality check, which is that the libido is the last thing that's going to come to fruition. But in the interim, all the other benefits should just be gradually going up over time.
Sure. So considering that, when do you start looking at potentially adjusting a dosage? Because if we have that initial phase where thing just is like wildfire and, you know, they're reacting like crazy, and then we get this patience that's required then for this equilibrium and for everything to creep up, what would really be a sensible time period then for you to actually assess the effect that that specific dose is having?
Yeah, cool. This is a great question. So people have different ways of doing this. The late Dr. John Crisler used to say there's an art and a science to TRT. Very, very, very true. I say there's multiple ways to skin a cat because I think that saying's funnier, but different ways to do things. The way that I recommend that we do it, so again, I'm going to talk about reference ranges because the units that people will be looking at are very different, and I always get them wrong when I'm in a podcast. So the optimal testosterone level for TRT is somewhere between the top quartile of the range and double the top of the range. With the range where it is now, maybe it's even triple the top of the range. It's getting that low. So that's a big range, but we're also looking at a big patient population. You've got everyone from 18-year-olds to 80-year-olds with every level of health. So there should be a big range. I think, and again, this is coming from years of coaching experience, having a couple of clinics, doing a lot of this, I think the best course of action, and people may disagree, but that's cool, is that we should shoot, assuming the guy is in relatively good health, shoot for about the top of the range to start with. Because that is generally going to be 3 to 4xing their testosterone levels. That's a lot. That may not be the end destination. And for a lot of younger guys, it absolutely isn't. But the way that I like to do it is to shoot for about the top of the reference range to begin with. I can already feel people freaking out because I'm talking about staying within the reference range, but shooting for the top of the reference range, which for most guys, assuming you respond averagely, is about 120 to about 160 milligrams per week of testosterone, divided into 2 to 3 shots. And then once you get to that point, I like to let it settle there for a good 3 to 4 months and go, okay, we've given it 8 to 12 weeks to build up. Your levels are about in that point. Let's let it settle. And then when they come back after that point, their body's taking time to adjust. We'll see how they're feeling. And if they're going, hey, everything feels fantastic, everything feels awesome, cool. If it ain't broke, don't fix. That's fantastic. Because more is not better past a certain point for each guy. And what will happen is guys will come in and go, oh, I want to up my dose. And then they'll come back and they'll be like, oh, now I have all these side effects. And it's like, well, this is why you don't pick your own dose, bro. So at that point, if they come back, so let's say they've been on, they've been in this kind of top of the range, give or take by a quartile, and they're going, yeah, I feel like there's some room for improvement here. That's when I think titration should begin up. I like to titrate by 5 to 10 milligrams per injection. So that would typically look like, 10 to 30 milligrams per week. I think titrating by any more than that causes kind of like a whiplash effect. So it's not that could take you too high, it's that you get too high too quick. So I like to titrate by, again, averages by about, 15 to 25 milligrams a week every 3 to 4 months until we reach that sweet spot where they feel good. The thing with the TRT dosing is that you can always bring it up and bring it down. Like you don't have to go, oh, once I get there, then I can't come back down. It's like, no, you can come back down. We can adjust this to a point that it feels good. And the most important thing that we're looking at is not so much what is that testosterone number on paper, it's how does the rest of the blood work look, particularly things like the holistic relationship between like lipids, liver panel, red blood cell count, blood pressure, sleep, all of these factors as well, and also seeing how they're feeling day to day. If you take too much testosterone, yeah, you'll feel like a beast in the gym, but you'll also sweat like a motherfucker after you eat. Your sleep will go to shit. There's a whole bunch of side effects that come if you go past that sweet spot. So titrating up in increments of, as I said, 10 to 30 milligrams every 3 to 4 months after they've taken about, 3 to 6 months to settle into the starting dose to begin with, I think is the best way to play it.
Sure. And how much variation do you see? First, in terms of what number ends up being optimal for that person, but also how that person responds to X dosage. So like you put all 3 of us on 200 milligrams per week, and the response you see in terms of testosterone level in response to that. Yeah. How much variation is there at a population level? Sure.
So I wrote a book about this a couple of years ago called TRT 101, and I'm happy to say that it's aged like wine. It's aged. I stand by everything in that book. So I have found that there is about 8 out of 10 guys will respond about the same, within a striking distance of the same kind of levels. 1 out of 10 guys will shoot through the roof, taking next to nothing. I have guys who are taking like 70 milligrams a week, and their levels are as high as the average guy taking 250. Those guys are lucky. Like, that's awesome. I also have guys who are taking 300 milligrams a week, and they're barely hitting the top of the reference range. So I find that 8 out of 10 about the same. 1 in 10 hyper responder, 1 in 10 hypo responder, meaning low. But 8 out of 10 fall into the same category. And that's why, so in Australia and Europe, we compound testosterone at 250 milligram per mil. I think 150 per week is a good starting dose for most guys. SHBG is a factor. There's other factors that will impact that because it divides into 0.2 mil 3 times a week or 0.3 mil twice a week. It makes it easy to do. And that will typically give someone a total testosterone of about 25 to 35 nanomole per liter. I'm not sure what the conversion is into the numbers that you guys use over here, but that's about the top of the range, give or take. That works really well. Now, in terms of response to the numbers on paper, the other side of it, that varies more. And that's where it's kind of more of a mix. And when we're looking at, again, talking about the free testosterone relative to the reference range, I do find that, again, it's not a perfectly correlated variable, but age is a factor. It seems the younger the guy, the higher they need their free testosterone to be to resolve their symptoms. That makes sense. Plus, if a guy is symptomatic at a relatively higher level, then it makes sense that he needs his free testosterone to be higher to achieve symptom resolution. I have some guys where if you take them above the top of the reference range, they get those I call it cranked, which is like you have too much energy in a bad way. It's like you're overstimulated, but it's uncomfortable. It's like too much caffeine side effects. Anywhere above the reference range, they feel like that. I have other guys where until they get to double the top of the reference range, they feel like it's not doing anything. And that's when they've got all their other lifestyle factors in check as well. So I find that the younger they are, the healthier they are, the more they benefit from the higher end testosterone levels. And when you get the older guys, that's a little bit more correlated with doing better lower. But there are so many exceptions to the rule that it's like a loose correlation. So more variance.
How does that change because you touched on this a little bit earlier, if you're working with somebody that basically was blasting shit for a decade.
Yeah.
Right. And now they want to kind of move into the TRT, where to them you're going to say 70 milligrams a week and they're going to laugh and spit in your face and shit like that. But you noted before that their decrease in the thyroid and DHEA and D. Yeah. What are some of the other things that will result if their dose has been over 1,000 milligrams per week for a decade? Sure. And then they start to... Basically, I don't want to say do they build immunity, to that higher dose to where they're going to need higher doses, or will they be able to come down to the lower doses?
So the literature says that androgen receptors upregulate when they're agonized. So if we use an example like amphetamine you build a tolerance to because your dopamine receptors downregulate. So you need more to achieve the effect. The literature says that androgen receptors upregulate when you agonize them with something like testosterone. So in theory, guys who've been blasting gear should be more sensitive or should be no less sensitive than other guys. That's not the case in practice, but that's what the literature says. In practice, when guys have been, cruising on like 500 milligrams a week plus for years, maybe even decades, they definitely need more than a guy who's never had optimal testosterone levels before, because and this is just my theory, their body has been conditioned around a much higher androgen environment. So if you take a guy who's been on, 500 milligrams a week and you bring him down to like, 120 a week, that's probably going to feel pretty terrible for him. Now, would he level out there over time? Maybe, but I haven't seen that be the case. I think that when a guy's been on higher doses for a prolonged period, that's when we want to work him down into still a physiological range, which I think the physiological range is still 2 to 3 times the top of the reference range. But I think those guys are more looking at, again, if they're an average responder, we're looking at doses of like 200, 250, sometimes 300 milligrams a week. So the higher end of TRT, because, and some people, like, there seems to be this there's not really like a hard line in the sand where it's like below here is TRT and above here is steroids. And people like to go, well, the line's here, or lines, there's no line, there's just a blurry mess in the middle. But when we look at testosterone optimization, testosterone is healthy for you up until the point that it's not. And in science, we call this an inverse U-shaped response, which is that too little shit, too much is shit, different kind of shit. But there's a sweet spot in the middle. But once you pass that sweet spot, you get problems, just like if there's too little, you get problems as well. And if you've been taking a large amount for a while, if you're also trying to maintain a supraphysiological amount of muscle mass as well, you're not going to do that on a low-end TRT dose. So it is important that if these guys are like, hey, and this is where it's so important to have a provider who knows what they're doing and to be transparent. It's like, I want to be able to take the higher end TRT dose that's going to not jeopardize my health, but that's going to allow me to get the best performance out of my training and maintain the best muscle mass and the best feeling of well-being. I advocate that for everyone, because that's what's been the most therapeutic for me, and that's been what's been the most therapeutic for a lot of my clients as well. And that's where it's really important to go, okay, let's say a guy's going to take, 250 a week, for example. That's when it's really important that we're monitoring all those other blood markers to go, are you actually tolerating this? Which is, what's your blood pressure? What's your red blood cell count? Are your lipids out of whack? Are your liver enzymes out of whack? Where's your EGFR? And if those things are all optimal and within, healthy range, I found it very interesting for myself. I got started like years ago before I knew what I was doing originally I got started on 250 a fortnight, but once I kind of got a decently competent practitioner, I was on 175 a week, split into 2 shots. And when I pushed it up to 250, which for me brings me right up to about double the top of the reference range, all my other health markers improved. So I didn't get, my blood pressure went down, my EGFR went up, my liver enzymes went down, my triglycerides went down, my LDL went down, my red blood cell count went down. All of these things that people would associate with taking too much testosterone, it went the inverse direction. So I think that it's important that we find the healthy dose for everyone. And for someone who's been taking a lot for a while, I think that's still going to be a higher end TRT dose. Yeah.
Stop doing all the things you know you shouldn't be doing and start doing all the things you know you should be doing. If people are looking for where to start, it's that. Testosterone is what creates confidence. It's what gives the capacity for leadership. It's what drives the ability for one to become courageous and competent in their skill set. If you go on TRT and then live a lifestyle that you would never have those levels in the first place, your blood's going to get really